Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives, and today we're going to be concluding our discussion on the Gwenverse miniseries as well as the Spider-Zero era as a whole as we take a look at Spider-Gwen, Gwenverse number 5. So, last time on Gwenverse. So, in an attempt to be proactive, Gwen and her various time-displaced doppelgangers wound up trying to take the fight directly to the last remaining members of the Terminal 6, Dr. Cephalopod and Nightbird. Unfortunately, the attack kind of went AWOL as both the villains were able to fend the Gwens off easily and then escape to the final area of time where the final Gwen variant was, specifically one that was Captain Marvel. In the attempt, basically, however, going in, they actually had a plan to take her down. In this case, they wound up revealing to Captain Marvel that she was basically just a proxy soldier that the Kree were using to invade Earth, gather information, and eventually prepare the Kree Empire to, take over the planet. Something that Captain Marvel herself wasn't exactly okay with, and it caused her to go into emotional turmoil. The end result of this is that she wound up overcharging her negabands, and the Supreme Intelligence, not happy that Captain Marvel wasn't listening to it anymore, decided to just actually pump the power up even further. As such, in an attempt to save everyone, Captain Marvel wound up flying into the sky, and sadly she was blown up with the negabands, which in turn started destroying most of New York. However, in some bit of good news, in the initial as the Gwens wound up traveling to the initial timeline to duke it out with Dr. Cephalopod and Nightbird, Spider-Gwen wound up actually duking it out with her, Heroes Reborn counterpart, and a little bit of her suit wound up bonding with Nightbird and purged her of the goblin gas that had gotten into her system, effectively returning her back to the side of the Angels and making her a good guy again. Sadly, this also came around the same time that Captain Marvel blew up, and so in a bid to save everyone, Spider-Zero pulled all 6 Gwens out of time, and sadly, it was what happened with Captain Marvel that kind of sealed the fate for Earth-65, as basically, while she saved a good chunk of people, sadly a lot of people still died in her explosion, and basically everyone started losing trust in heroes, turned to old gods, Oztec stepped in to provide new technology, they passed the Marvel lost superheroes, yada yada yada. However, Spider-Zero does claim that there is still one place that the Gwens can go in order to, wrap all this up. And that's basically to take the fight directly to Finale's doorstep. And so, last issue ended as all 6 Gwens charged in to the end of time to duke it out with Finale, which is where today's issue begins, as the Gwens are ready to just duke it out with Finale. And sure enough, each of them does try to end up rushing in and tries to get a good lick in on the lady, but sadly they're still outclassed. While each of them are strong on their own, they're still having issues coordinating with one another. And so basically, while they are able to essentially dent Finale a little, they can't really break through her defense. And so and the thing is, she's still juiced up on all of the power of all the life force that she siphoned from her fans, so she just kind of starts walking right through them lickety split, and she does fully intend to just kill them all right here and right now. And on top, which to make it worse, she ends up knocking Spider-Gwen right into the crowd, knocking over quite a few statue people. And so Gwen just kind of starts lamenting that they're probably going to lose this one. Finale is too powerful and they cannot take her down in a fair fight. However, there is one thing that does spur Gwen on, and that's the sound of Irma, who is standing over the remains of her owners, and she's just apologizing, basically saying that if it wasn't for her being the center of attention for Finale's final meme, then these two wouldn't have been here and they wouldn't have been turned to dust. And looking at this, it spurs something in Gwen, and, she remembers when Peter died, how she held him in her arms, and how his last words were how he wanted to be like her. It reminds her of all the guilt she feels about why she's Spider-Woman in the first place. And it finally hits Gwen what that connecting thread is that connects her with all of her counterparts. And so, back with Finale and the other Gwens, they were all pretty much just knocked aside, and Finale has Nightbird in her grasp. As well as Nightbird was not one of the variants created by the Finalizer, she's still an alternate Gwen, and she's fighting against her. So she's essentially, and considering that she was made the new leader of the Terminal 6, essentially she's just a traitor at this point, so Finale's just all more than ready to kill her. However, that's when Spider-Gwen comes in, and she basically just starts and she manages to free Nightbird from Finale's grasp before kicking her away and then webbing her into a ring. So even Gwen knows that that's not going to be enough to hold her in place, but it will give her enough time to actually talk with the Gwens. And yeah, she expresses that one connecting thread, that ultimately they're all variants of her. which means they all have one very big thing in common. They all don't like themselves. All of them have regrets, and all of them, in some way, shape, or form, don't exactly like who they are as people. Which in turn does end up transferring to all the other Gwens, which in turn is what makes it hard for any of them to, coordinate. And sure enough, yeah, they all do kind of confirm that they do have their own self-doubts. Thor-Gwen admits that she feels guilty over the fact that Odin prefers her over Loki because, well, the thing is, she's not the original Thor. She was essentially adopted, and yet she's the favorite daughter. And as a result, because of that favoritism, Loki got sent into madness. In the case of Captain America, she feels guilty that because she became the new Captain America, well, Samantha Wilson got pushed out of the limelight and thus was forgotten. Wolverine, it's self-explanatory. She's Wolverine. Wolverine has got a rap sheet a mile wide no matter the continuity. Iron Gwen still feels guilty over the fact that her mere existence caused a wedge between Howard and Norman to the point where Norman went batshit insane. And in the case of Nightbird, she feels guilty because while the goblin gas is what made her go insane, a lot of the things that were in there were things that were under the surface. It's just the goblin gas allowed it to come out full blown. And Gwen even cites that ultimately it was that self-doubting guilt that even destroyed Captain Marvel, as she did not like the fact that she was essentially just a sleeper agent that was there to usher in Earth's destruction. The people that she cared about. And as a result, basically, Gwen tells all of them that they have to work together. They got to work on themselves, and if they want to fight as one and beat Finale, then they need to do one thing that none of them really want to. They need to forgive themselves. However, as this pep talk comes to a close, Finale does manage to break free from Spider-Gwen's webs, but at this point, it turns out that the pep talk did exactly what it was supposed to. As the Gwens finally decide, you're right, we do need to forgive ourselves, and so with renewed zeal, all of them stand as one, and then charge at Finale, with Spider-Gwen even yelling, "Gwenvengers assemble!" which is supposed to be reusing a line that one of the Terminal 6 used, but whatever. Basically, the Gwens are now working in harmony, and they just start pretty much just piling on to Finale, working in sync, taking her down, coordinating their attacks, until they finally until they almost knock her to the edge of her platform. Of course, this still doesn't beat Finale completely, as she just says, well, great, now you can work as one, but you won't be able to take me down just like that. But this is where I have to remind you of something. We're at the end of time, and Finale did state in the first issue that part of the reason why the space-time continuum was going down the crapper was because it kept getting fucked seven ways from sideways because of all the things that were going on across time and space. And it turns out Finale messing with the finalizers, sending the Terminal 6 back in time, didn't exactly help things. In fact, it actually sped things along a little, and so sure enough, the fissure where the end of time is immediately starts erupting as time and space are starting to fall apart. And Finale quickly realizes, oh shit, I did this. Before which are the last words she says, where she's consumed by the energy. As such, the Gwens realize they're kind of screwed. Even if Finale is gone, this thing is just going to keep moving backwards through time and continue consuming worlds, and will eventually just continue consuming all of time and space. Realities, timelines, everything will just fall apart. As such, Gwen thinks that maybe if they could go back in time to before Finale did all this, then maybe they could, stop all this and stop Finale before she even did anything. But unfortunately, the time machine doesn't have a lot of power. After all, Finale had to siphon all the energy from her fans just to get just to turn this thing on in the first place. And while Gwen could potentially power it with her symbiote, it's still not enough power. And as such, the Gwens realize that if they want this thing to have enough power to send Gwen back far enough to stop Finale before she set all this in motion, then they unfortunately have to utilize some of their own abilities, which Gwen is not exactly happy with, because that means she'll be leaving them behind in this era. And the thing is, if Gwen does go back in time and stop Finale, then that'll ensure that none of her other selves are created in the first place. So essentially, yeah, by them staying here, they're essentially all killing themselves. But the Gwens do state they're okay with this. They're willing to sacrifice themselves just for the sake of they're willing to sacrifice themselves just for the sake of saving all of reality. And even they admit that their existence themselves caused time to go haywire, so maybe it is best that they stay behind. With even Nightbird telling Gwen, look, it's okay, we're doomed either way, so you need to make a choice. And while the Gwen doesn't want to make the choice, the other Gwens assure her it's for the best. They can take it. It's fine. As such, the comic rewinds a bit as we see Finale just after she showed everyone the penultimate meme, talking about how she feels their sad emotes, how how she knows they're all sad that she won't live, yada yada yada, blah blah blah. But just before she can get ready to get the finalizer up and running, a portal opens, and from it flies Irma from the future, who immediately just yells at everyone, take your emotors off, this bitch be cray-cray, and this is a trap. As such, while most of the people in the crowd don't really get it, thinking it's all part of the show, they do end up complying and start taking off their emotors, with Irma's owners are even confused at the fact that there's now two of her running around, but ultimately, yeah, this ends up putting a kink in Finale's plan. As such, seeing that everything's going foobar, Finale immediately runs to the finalizer with the intent of turning it on and siphoning whatever life force she can still get, but that's when Gwen comes through and just kind of mocks her, saying, really? Without all the future technology and reincarnation and supervillains, you're just an influencer? What do you even have to you? And Finale's only response is, I can make memes. That earns her a punch in the face from Gwen and knocks her down. So, Gwen still kind of got a win there. Unfortunately, though, as we established before, messing with time does not exactly help when you're at the end of time. And sure enough, Gwen jumping back all that time to stop Finale there, it hastened the end of time, and the end of time has now reached this point in time as well, and is now getting ready to consume everything. As such, everyone in the crowd makes a run for it, and likewise Irma from the future reunites with her owners, meaning they now have two Irmas, so lucky them, I guess. But while everyone wants to stay behind to potentially help Gwen, future Irma does state that she's got all this, with past Irma confirming, look, I'm not impressed by anything, so if future me thinks that she's got this, I think she's got this. Unfortunately, Gwen really has no idea what to do. This is the end of time, and she's just a lady that can shoot webs out of her wrists. How can she take this down? However, that's when Finale speaks, and we soon see who she is beneath the mask. The blue skin that we saw is just a mask. When she takes it off, beneath it, she's just a frail old woman holding on to dear life. And yeah. She quickly realizes that her whole pursuit of immortality to be remembered was a waste of time. And so, she has one request of Gwen, because the thing is, Finale's the only one in the multiverse that still remembers her mother. So if she's gonna die here, she wants one thing of her mother's to still be remembered. And that's something that her mother used to say, which was mentioned in an earlier comic, but I didn't bring it up. But basically the phrase is this: everyone wants what they don't have, everyone forgets what they do. Everything falls behind us. Everything like prints from a shoe. And so, Gwen does remember those words, and Finale sadly passes away in her arms. Unfortunately, though, there's still the end of time to deal with. This thing is going to continue going back through time and destroying entire realities, alternate timelines. It won't just be Earth 65 that goes down the crapper, it'll be every universe. And Gwen has no idea how to hold it all together. That is, till she sees something. A thread that even she realizes that she would have easily missed, because it looks like a trick of the light. But as Gwen looks at the thread, she realizes something. That's the thread that was connecting her to her other selves. And here, at the end of time, the thread is refracted. And in those refractions, Gwen sees her other selves, all their other lives, all of them that are still a part of her. Her other selves may not exist anymore, but everything that they did, everything that they were, is still being reflected through Gwen. And she may be waxing poetics here, but in her own words, these choices, these decisions, these lives they made did leave shoe prints across time and space. And as a result, they created their own worlds. An entire multiverse of Gwens. All of them centered on Gwen. Which I like to think that means that this thread has somehow preserved her other selves, allowed them to exist in their own separate realities. Which, if that's the case, I want that. I'm actually okay with that, because it does kind of suck that they would all just be erased like that. But either way, with all that potential inside her, Gwen does kind of takes the thread and absorbs the cosmic energy into her. and that basically gives her the extra boost she needs. As powered by her multiverse of selves, all their potential, all the possibilities, she's able to shoot out a few cosmic webs and literally hold all of time and space together. So, yeah. Sorry, Chindy's coming in. Gwen saved the reality, so good on her, I guess. Sorry, Chindy's climbing on the bed. And so from there, we get a bit of a wrap-up. Basically, according to Gwen's exposition, after she pretty much stitched together all of time and space, well, she did end up saving reality. Because the Finalizer never got fired now, basically all of Gwen's other selves that would have been reincarnated no longer got reincarnated throughout history. As such, Earth 65's history is now completely fine. And again, like Gwen said, I like to at least believe that her other selves, thanks to how they were refracted now do all exist in their own individual realities. They now can exist in worlds where they're not screwing with history just by existing. They now can live their own lives, free as birds, so to speak. But in the case of Gwen, she's still a little exhausted, and so she wound up and so Spider-Zero just kind of let her take a week off, just crash in the future, and after that, she sent her home. Sorry about that again. Let me fix this. Sorry about that. Hold on one second. Sorry about that Chindy stuff, but yeah, basically after spending a week crashing on her couch, Spider-Zero does send Gwen back to her proper time, and yep, Earth 65 is back to normal. It's back to being low super, as she calls it, and, well, essentially, from the perspective of all of her loved ones, she disappeared for a week because, well, she did say she took a week off. Her dad thinks that she was using that week to bum around Earth 65, to bum around Earth 616, while her band is a little angry that she just wasn't around. And so, yeah, she still has issues with them, but she is clearly still trying to work on everything, as she does reassure her dad that she does still want to put more work into being his hero, which results in her giving him a hug. And likewise, while the Mary Janes are still pissed at Gwen, she's still a part of the band, and she still helps out whenever she can. She even provides lyrics for the next song, which, yes, are the lyrics that Finale's mom told her. As such, with everything said and done, Gwen does finally come to terms with everything, and does kind of think about all the aspects of herself, how boisterous she can be, how she can be how she can sometimes be selfless, how she can sometimes have a short fuse, how she can sometimes be nerdy, and how sometimes the weight of everything can come down on her, but at the end of the day, that's all what makes her her. And there's still a lot of good to do in the world. And so, the comic ends as Gwen suits up, swings her way into the city, and while she remarks that this world may be low super, it still has a hero in the form of Gwen Stacy, and in Gwen's opinion, she kind of likes her. So, all right, so that was Spider-Gwen Gwenverse. First, my thoughts on the issue. Again, it's fine. Again, I don't like saying that because the finale is, well, serviceable, to say the least. It's not a bad finale by any means, and I at least like how part of the thing that helps bring the Gwens together is that they all kind of have to accept that each of them got issues that they need to work on. And the thing is, and whether consciously or not, they were kind of projecting those issues onto their other selves since, well, the Gwens don't really like themselves very much, and now they're suddenly having to work with a bunch of other people who have their faces and have a lot of their personality traits. Of course, when put in that situation, you're not gonna be a cohesive unit right away. But with that said, I do at least like that it was by accepting those faults and for each of the Gwens forgiving themselves that did allow them to move past it. And I do admit that there was a little bit of tragedy from having that come together, and like I said, I do like the idea that the finale did showcase that while the Gwens that we saw were erased, so to speak, they do still exist in some form across the multiverse, as again, they were all still connected to Gwen by a single cosmic thread, and ultimately by embracing that cosmic thread, she essentially pooled all those possibilities into her, and by stitching together reality, she allowed it to exist across time and space, which essentially ensures, in my opinion, or at least how I interpret it, that the other Gwens do survive, just in different forms. They now have each their own worlds, like I said. And the thing is, that's kind of sort of confirmed in the next Spider-Gwen miniseries that happens after this, which involves Gwen meeting clones of herself that are based off of each of Spidey's regular villains. And she does confirm, yeah, her other selves are alive, and they are living in their own universes now. So, again, good on that. Good on them, I guess. I am kind of okay with that, as it does at least showcase that all the fighting that they went through did ensure that they would at least get their own individual happy endings. Because again, it did kind of annoy me that how they were brought together was because they were screwing with time, and it did make me wonder why would they help Gwen if they were going to lose everything they cared about. But again, that's just how I interpret it. That's how I interpret it. And at the very least, I do still like how the ending has Gwen essentially fix everything by accepting everything that she is, and then using that as a baseline to essentially stitch the multiverse back together. Again, sorry, Chindy came in. But, so, at the very least, I like that. It does actually feel like an emotionally cathartic ending in that regard, and I do like that the ending in the comic does kind of reflect what happened in the first issue, with Gwen kind of listing all of her faults, talking about how low super her world is, and how, while in the first issue she talked about how she didn't like herself very much, by going through this journey she's kind of learned to love herself, faults and all. So, I dig that, it's nice. What holds the book back for me, though, at least, is, sadly enough, again, the Gwens. That's kind of where things kind of fall flat for me. While I did like seeing Gwen working alongside her other selves, and I will say this, the moment when all the Gwens kind of accept all of their faults and start working together, I think that's good. That is a genuinely good moment, and the finale with Gwen's emotional catharsis, I think, does feel earned. The problem, in my opinion, however, is that, again, we don't really see how all of the other Gwens are dealing with this crisis. The thing is, when it came down to the wire, all of the Gwens were sadly just plot devices. They weren't really there to be featured as major characters. They were there to be essentially they were essentially there to help jumpstart the plot. And while we did see the Gwens clashing on occasion, we didn't really get to know them as characters, which in my opinion is kind of a problem, because the thing is, how would it have been, again, one of the things that holds the story back for me is the fact that we don't get to see how each of the Gwens interprets the knowledge that they are all created as a byproduct of an experiment from Finale gone awry, and them all learning that their mere existences are altering the history of a certain world in the multiverse, and that if they want to fix it, they sadly have to step out of time. That is never addressed again. We never really see why the Gwens are going along with this. And we can speculate why based on their personalities, but we never really get any confirmation. Now, to be fair, in this issue, they could showcase that part of the reason why the Gwens may have gone along with it the way they did is because, like Spider-Gwen, many of them might have had their own issues, and many of them did have self-doubts and worries. That Captain America Gwen may have been okay stepping out of time because she thought maybe the world shouldn't have me. I took all the attention away from the real Captain America, and I just stole all her energy. Maybe they don't want me. Maybe I shouldn't be here anymore. Maybe it's a similar case with Thor Gwen, that for all her boasting and wanting attention, she's actually hiding pain in herself, which is again kind of confirmed when she talks about how basically because she got all the attention and Loki was spurred, she feels guilty for that, so that could be the case. And then likewise, it could be the same with the other Gwens. After all, we saw what happened. We saw Iron Gwen's tragic backstory playing out in Wolverine. Again, it's self-explanatory. They could each have reasons for why they did what they did, and we could kind of find proof of that when we looked at when Gwen's Captain Marvel variant, who, when learning what she did, got so overwhelmed with grief and self-doubt that she overloaded the negabands and they blew up. As a result, you could argue that each of the Gwens went along with their Earth 65 counterpart because they all maybe believed that the world would be better off without them, and learning that their mere existences changed history so drastically might have helped add fuel to that fire. The problem is, however, that we don't see the story through any of the other Gwen's eyes. We see them interact with the main Gwen, but the story is always primarily focused on her. And to be fair, it makes sense why she would be the main focus. After all, the miniseries is called Spider-Gwen, Gwenverse. While that title alone would imply that Gwen meets other versions of herself, but at the end of the day, as long as her name is at the forefront, then she's going to be the center of attention. And so likewise, we see the character journey she feels, but we never really get to see anything through her counterpart's eyes, which I think was sadly a missed opportunity. Wouldn't it have been cool if we actually learned how each of the Gwens thought about this? That maybe they did ponder about the fact that their existences were essentially messing with time so bad, and how each of them kind of came to terms with that? Would that be bad? Would that be good? I don't know, but I would have loved to have seen that. And I think that as a result, it would have made the finale, when Gwen finally realizes the common thread connecting all of them was their guilt and self-doubt, I feel like that would have made the ending stronger. But as a result, it doesn't really feel like anything was really earned there. It doesn't really feel like a genuine connection was built up to well enough. It feels like that at best, all we know is that the Gwens have trouble working alongside each other, and now Gwen suddenly says, "Hey, we all have self-guilt. Maybe we just need to forgive ourselves," which, again, I feel like that ending wasn't really earned. So yeah, I'm going to call that a problem. And sadly, a side effect of that also kind of goes to when the Gwens are destroyed. While I do like seeing the Gwens work together, and I will not deny, seeing all the Gwens in the same room together does have a similar charm to previous Spider-Verse themed events. Seeing all the Spideys of the multiverse working alongside each other, seeing the Venoms of the multiverse working alongside each other. This story has similar trends to it that does, in my opinion, does make it still somewhat cool. The problem is that because we don't spend a lot of time with these Gwens, when they finally end up sacrificing themselves for the greater good of reality, it doesn't really feel like a loss, because we never really got the chance to know them. Now, to be fair, I am still glad that each of them got their own separate universes, because from a basic human standpoint, they did not deserve the lot that they were going to be given. All of them were essentially going to be pulled out of time just for simply existing and living their lives. And yet now, and basically in order to make sure everything stayed in place, they just had to, like, step back, do nothing, like, that's just a shit deal in any regard. So the fact that each of them, it's said at the end that each of them did get their own separate universe that they can now exist in and live on and live their lives without fear of screwing everything up. I like that. I at least like that. Now, you can make the argument that maybe it's not the same versions, so to speak, as the versions we met in this story where time we're reincarnated variants of our Gwen, but at the very least, I still like to think that those other versions are based on those. So, again, make of that what you will. But I still think that it was not exactly built up too well. And even then, I'm just going to say this right now, the whole thread thing, it feels kind of like an ass pull. It feels weird. Like, there's a random thread there that's actually connected to all the Gwens, and that Gwen needs to absorb it, and that's by absorbing its power and shooting out cosmic webs, she's able to hold time and space together. It's weird, to say the least, and it really feels like a Deus Ex Machina, because, yeah, I get it. End of time, it's going to destroy everything, but still, just kind of feels weird is all I'm saying. So, yeah, there are still factors in this issue that do hold it back, but I will still argue that it's at least decent. Just decent. In fact, I think I can say that for the entirety of Gwenverse. The story itself is just alright. It's just alright. A lot of the problems I have with the book are stuff that I've discussed about from issue to issue. Namely, I don't like how they handle dealing with all of the Gwens, because if I'm being honest, I still think it would have been better if all of the Gwens were different versions of our Gwen. Maybe they're being targeted for some specific purpose. Maybe there's a common thread in there. Maybe Finale is from Earth 65, and when she wants to do this whole reincarnation thing, she needs something from each of the other Gwens to do it. And then basically for her, she actually succeeds, and thus it alters Gwen's history, and so she wants to properly combat Finale, she needs to gather her other selves. But of course, there's still some emotional turmoil there, and of course, they're still having trouble working together before they can finally take the fight to finale. Again, I feel like there's some still better ways they could have done it. And to be fair, there are still aspects of what they did in the story that do make me like, that still kind of tickle my fancy. While we don't have multiversal variants of the Gwens, I still like that each of them did have their own unique lives that were suited to each individual Gwen. They weren't all just cookie cutter copy and paste of our Gwen's story. All of them did have their own lives beforehand, and each of them did have their own connections, things that defined them, that led them down the paths that they did. Thor Gwen was a peasant woman who always was ignored, and Mjolnir finally gave her a chance to be in the spotlight. Captain America Gwen was an orphan who grew up reading the original Earth 65's original Captain America comics and strove to be like her. Wolverine was Wolverine, pretty much, except it looks like she hasn't lost her memory. And Iron Gwen, despite being a variant of Gwen Stacy, was also a proxy to Tony Stark, as she was adopted by Howard Stark and was the one that helped him design the Iron Gwen armor. So I do like that. And the same goes for Captain Marvel. I actually like that when we peek in on her world, there's plenty there that does kind of parallel the life of Spider-Gwen, about how she's in a band alongside Mary Jane, how she has a secret double life as a superhero, and and what I kind of like is that apparently, like I said, J. Jonah Jameson likes her. Good on her, I guess. That's funny. But my point is this: my point is, I did still like that, but it still kind of bugged me that each of the Gwens were just time reincarnations, and as a result, the story does not really work in that regard. It just kind of feels a little annoying in that regard. And while there are still things in there that I do enjoy, I liked how Gwen's journey to capture her other selves and stop the Terminal 6 from killing them that unintentionally that essentially knocked over the dominoes that led to the future she arrived back on. I like seeing the tragedy with some of the Gwens. But at the same time, going back to how they're not, again, Chinny jumped off the bed. Hold on, let me adjust this. Going back to how none of the Gwens are multiversal variants, but essentially reincarnations of Gwen, it did make me wonder why any of them went back to it. And another fault of that, sadly, has to do with the fact that we don't spend a lot of time with each of the Gwens and how they think. We don't really know what each of their lives are like, what spurs them on, what makes them want to be here, what spurs them on, who they are personally, or why they're okay with being on this mission in the first place. We can speculate based on the evidence in the book, and maybe each of them had similar self-loathing issues that Spider-Gwen did, and genuinely thought maybe the world is better without us, especially since our existences seem to be screwing up time itself. So, in that regard, maybe we could have had something better, but we don't have something better, because we don't really connect to these Gwens in that regard. Hell, kind of going with Iron Gwen, I think she was the worst offender. At least of the other Gwens, we got a sense of their characters before they joined Spider-Gwen. Iron Gwen came in, showed off the armor, and then had her life fall apart, so we didn't really get a chance to know her before she joined the team. So, in that regard, it doesn't really feel like we can build a proper connection. And unlike with previous Spider-Verse events, well, we don't know these Gwens. Part of the thrill that came with, like, Spider-Verse and even Venomverse was the fact that we saw Spider-Man teaming up with not just new variants of himself, but familiar ones as well. And as a result of that, we were able to check back in with these Spidey stories. And even for some of the new Spideys that they introduced, they were able to give them their own stories that we were able to follow up on. Hell, the fact that this miniseries at all is proof of that, because Spider-Gwen was one of the Spideys introduced in Spider-Verse, and she went on to have her own solo series. Multiple solo series, in fact. Each of them picking up where the other one left off. And depending on who you talk to, each of them vary in quality. So, whatever. My point is this. At least with those stories, you were able to kind of get some sense of thrill. Even in the case of Venomverse, where most of the Venom variants were just insert name of superhero if they bond with a Venom symbiote, you still got a sense of who they were as characters because you knew the characters. And many of them still had relatable issues and problems. And for some of them, we were able to peek in on some of their individual lives, like with the Host Rider. His death in Venomverse was a lot more tragic knowing the history of Robbie Reyes. And then likewise, And then likewise, we saw Spinneret in there, who was from the Renew Your Vows universe. And then, of course, seeing all these, and of course, because most of them are familiar faces, we at least get a sense of what their stories are like, and thus we can still go kind of grow attached to them. Especially since there are little moments in since there were little moments in the issues where you were able to kind of connect with them and figure out who they were as people and how the war was affecting them. Whereas in Gwenverse, none of these Gwens kind of have that brand recognition, so to speak. The only real thing that pulls you in is, what if Gwen was this kind of superhero, was this superhero instead of Spider-Man? Which, to be fair, that's not a bad idea. I would have loved to see more of these stories expanded, and in some regards we did see that, and they were creative in their own regards. It's just that because we didn't get to know each of the Gwens personally or see their own individual person and didn't really see what their inner thoughts were, we didn't really get a chance to connect to them on a deeper level. We like them to a degree, but we don't really know them as well as we know Spider-Gwen. And like I said, as a consequence of that, when we get to issue 5 and Gwen has to try and connect to them via their shared self-hatred, when they all have to open up, these things don't really come out of nowhere, because we never really got a sense that all of these Gwens hated themselves as a result. Maybe with Iron Gwen, and you can understand Nightbird's thing because she got her switch flipped to evil. But likewise with stuff like Thor Gwen, Captain America, Wolverine, it didn't exactly help us in that regard. I don't think it was hinted at well enough. So as a result, it does kind of feel lacking. The connection with the other Gwens did not feel like it worked. And like I said, the finale with Gwen literally having to pool all of creation into herself to thread the thread time and space back together, it's like I said, kind of an ass-pull ending. It's poetic in its own regard, and I at least like that the ending of the story had Gwen kind of getting a better appreciation for herself, for her world, for her family, and even carrying on Finale's last request by recording her mother's words into a song, allowing them to still kind of be remembered in some way, shape, or form. So in that regard, there is something there that I love. So there is still something there that I enjoy. And like I said, I at least do like that. And like I said, we do still like the Gwens enough that I am glad that they did get their own worlds in the end. That they can exist in some form, even if they're not exactly the same versions we met in this story. So I do like that. But I will have to sadly say that while I don't hate Gwenverse, at the end of the day, I think it is a purely alright miniseries that if you wanted to read it, you could find something in there to enjoy just for some fan service and stuff. But there are plenty of flaws in this book that do hold it back. It keeps it from being a great story and ultimately just kind of makes it a decent to alright story. So yeah, if you want to read it, by all means, I recommend it, but I will also say your mileage may vary. So make of that what you will. So yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. I thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoy my look at this miniseries because, well, now that we're done with the Spider-Zero era, there is another era we gotta look at, in which, when I started these vlogs, this era would have been the ending, but of course, Marvel wants to still get some money out of it. But regardless, there is still a lot more comics to look at, so when we come back on Tuesday, it's time we enter what I call the finale era of the Spider-Verse retrospectives, with emphasis on the air quotes in finale, which I'll explain when we get there. But either way, I hope you enjoyed this video. I thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I'll hopefully see you on Tuesday. Take care.